Hello, everyone, and thank you for listening to Brain Foods, the podcast on female solutions for business and society. You can listen to Brain Foods on all major streaming platforms: Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and Buzzsprout. I'm your host, Hannah Becker, and today I have the great pleasure to introduce you to Nada Ahmed. Nada is the Vice President of Transformation at Aker. She's also a board member and was named Top 50 Women in Tech as of 2020. Welcome, Nada. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here with you today.
So we have Pakistan, Hong Kong, France, the USA, Norway, and now the next stop, innovation. Can you tell us a little bit about your career path to become the Vice President of Digitalisation and Transformation at Aker?
Yes, I'll be happy to. As you mentioned, I'm originally from Pakistan. That's where I grew up till I was 16. I was always, this ambitious, feisty girl who wanted to challenge the status quo. And, living in Pakistan, there was a lot to challenge as a woman. I always stood up for whatever I wanted and, always got into trouble too. But from a very early on sort of age, something that was sort of embedded in our family, my dad, he was an engineer. He had two girls, and he really wanted to make sure that we have a strong basis and foundation in math and science. So a lot of our summer vacations was spent doing math problems where he would tutor us, because he really wanted to prove the stereotype that women are not good in math wrong, and say no, they if they get a good foundation, they get good training, they can be as good as men in all those fields. And I think that was a good start for me in terms of entering at least this field, a technical field, even though, of course, at a very early age, I did not know what I wanted to do. I had some ideas. There were some things that I was inspired by, but life takes its own turns. As I said, I was curious as a girl, and I wanted to, explore the world. So I applied for this program that allowed people at the age of 16 to go study abroad and do the last 2 years of high school in another country. And I won that award from Pakistan to go and study in Hong Kong for 2 years, which was super exciting for me, having never left Pakistan before, and entering this very metropolitan city like Hong Kong. And that's really where I got to sort of explore a little bit on the different sciences, but also the humanities part, as I also moved on to college from there into the US. And early on, I thought, maybe I want to be a doctor. I had an uncle who was a doctor in the US, and I found it very inspiring. And he I met him once, and he told me if you want to do anything, have a safe career, become a doctor. And I said, okay, that's what I'll go for. But as I entered college, I discovered there was a whole range of, courses I could take. And I really got to explore the humanities side. I took French, while at the same time I focused on the sciences and got a pre-med degree. Afterwards, I wasn't quite sure, if I was cut out to actually be a doctor, if that's really where my passion lied. So I took a year in between when I finished my bachelor's to really think about what it is that I want to do. And I really wanted it rooted in sort of my passions. And something that I really strongly believed in was the environment and the sustainability aspect of business. And by that time, I'd moved to Houston, Texas, at Rice University, that was based on environmental science and environmental engineering. And then from there, I worked with carbon capture and storage. I started working for a Norwegian company, and that landed me around 2013 when we had another energy crisis. I really got to question a little bit, where do I focus on now? And transformation and digital was a big part of it. And so I was asked to lead in my company the digital transformation program. And even though at that time the whole digital technologies were quite new to me.
Mm.
But they wanted someone who could think a little bit differently and bring in sort of new ways of working for us to actually succeed there. I really stepped outside my comfort zone, got curious, and really took on this responsibility of running the program. And I went to different meetup groups to learn about big data, about Hadoop. So how do we combine sort of new ways of working with sort of the traditional, heavy industries, and bringing in, agile product development, bringing in lean startup. So sort of in the end, through that process, you kind of find your purpose of how can you help the world meet its sustainable development goals? How can we actually drive this energy transition? So that's where I am. And that's how I landed this job of VP transformation. And we're really, really at Aker Solutions at an exciting point in our history where we're probably going to go through one of the biggest transformations we've ever gone through in our 200 years of existence. So super, super excited to be on this journey.
I find it very interesting when you say you took your time to find your passion. And this is something I just want to highlight here also to our audience, because there is often these myriad pressures that we have around us, especially when we're young, right? We're like pressure to achieve things very fast, to start working very fast, to know exactly basically after you come out of high school, to know what it is that you want, that you take a year to find what is really important to you.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. I mean, if you're just entering tech for the sake of tech, or you're not going to last. I think as women, we sometimes have very strong intuitions, but we're being trained to not maybe listen to them so much.
Because it is really that there is so much outside stuff that can take our attention from ourselves. I think we have quite a good North Star, as we say, available, right? That will, if we foster it, if we really listen to it, guide us to where it is that we can find everyone has this North Star. We just get very confused, I think, through our life cycle, depending on how good we are with listening to our intuition.
We're conditioned to maybe, just follow a path and maybe not listen to our intuition, but just give yourself that space. And that purpose won't always be clear. It wasn't always clear to me, and there were times when I was like, what is my purpose? Why am I here? And it will evolve with time as you get more exposure, as you grow, as you learn. So just be open for that, open for pivoting and incorporating it more and more. And really, when I say being in touch with intuition, see what gives you energy, what drives you, and then try to focus more on that, bringing that energy into your work.
That is a great lead over, I think, to the next question that I would have for you. What are some of the biggest challenges that you can see when it comes to digitalization, innovation, and particularly diversity?
So, diversity is obviously a topic that I feel very passionately about, especially being in an environment which has traditionally been very male dominated. And so male dominated and, not a lot of diversity, at least in the areas in the places where I worked in. And so usually, living in Scandinavia now for the past 10 years, I think a particular problem that we face is that we're a very consensus-based culture. It's like everyone has to agree, and we're often conflict averse. We don't like conflict.
Yeah.
And I think that can play a role in actually hindering the benefits of diversity and inclusion, because you can invite people who are different. You can invite people who come from different backgrounds. You can invite more women into rooms which were predominantly male. But if you're not allowing them to show up with their opinions, with their different points of views, with their different ways of thinking and doing things differently, which will disrupt a little bit of the harmony that you had before, because before these women entered the room, everyone thought the same way, maybe. There was less conflict, or it was a conflict in a different way. But now we're presented conflict in completely different ways. People are raising their hands, they're asking questions. Why are we going on this way? Why are we doing things the way that we've done for the past 100 years? So being open to that kind of inquiry is super, super important for making sure that you get true benefits of diversity. And that leads to innovation, that leads to new ideas. When you can create that space, and it doesn't mean that all the time you should be in sort of this conflicting mode, but creating this space and arenas where you can have these discussions, where you can say, well, this is this meeting is so that we can actually discuss these 2 point of views, and then assigning people in the room, you take the pro side and you take the con side, and let's actually discuss and really hash through this idea so that we can then get to the right outcome in the end, knowing that that's our purpose, right? And the best way to do that, where you can create an environment where people can speak up and there can be healthy dialogue, discussion, and conflict, is by creating an environment where there's trust.
Yeah.
So if you don't have trust, if you don't have psychological safety, as it's called, you're not going to be able to get those different voices that are going to be able to speak up. And how do you create that trust? I mean, there's a lot of different ways of doing that, but making sure that you actually care about the people who are in the room, that you spend some time together, share your personal stories, share your motivations, get to know your team, and that allowing them to raise their voices. And often for people with minority backgrounds, you need allyship. So you need people, if you see that, in a room of 10 men, there's one woman who's speaking up, making an argument against the predominant argument, be that person who supports that idea. Yeah. Because you need that allyship. You need to sort of give them that confidence that they can build up and that their points of views are valued.
It's always this very fine line, as you say, between being in conflict and encouraging healthy discourse or healthy conflict. We need environment that fosters trust, where we have a basic understanding. Just because of your opinion or because of your background, because of your aptitude or knowledge, we won't disregard you for your opinion. It is really important, as you say, to really make sure our opinion doesn't determine who we are as a person.
Exactly. So it's not about the person, it's about the issue, right? You're not always holding it against that person and saying, well, Nada, whenever she comes in the room, she's always disagreeing with me. Well, it's not about the person, it's about the issue, right? Right. And always focusing on the issue. And I think that's super important when you're trying to create new solutions and you're trying to promote diversity and diverse thoughts.
We can see in the last 50 years, we've seen a dramatic shift in traditional family roles. As a result, now women are in stronger positions. They are now leading, they're shaping and transforming economic, social, and political landscapes. Yet, despite these positive leadership changes, we can still see that women are being underrepresented in the workforce. So we have, for example, 12% of board seats that are held by women globally. Women make up only a quarter of the tech workforce at the moment, as we can see it. When we talk about creating an inclusive environment, what we just did, that fosters trust, where we can have healthy conflict, how can digital transformation by itself provide an opportunity for such an inclusion?
I mean, even in Norway, you think Scandinavia is more egalitarian, but when it comes to leadership, we lag behind. So in Norway, only 14 of our top 200 companies have female CEOs, right? Right? Like, how long is it going to take before we get to 100 out of those 200, right? We do not have time to wait. And at the same time, you're seeing more and more women enter these technical fields. They are entering universities and getting engineering, but again and again, I see them drop out. Because of the way our work is set up. And one of the questions that I posed on Women's Day to my team was like, is our workplace designed for women? I mean, it's built on a culture that's over hundreds of years has been predominantly male. And back to your question on, digital transformation, and I think digital transformation is a wonderful opportunity for us to actually make a difference and make that dent, because it's about innovation. It's where you actually need challenging voices. You need those different points of views, and show that how we can actually create new products that are that will serve more of your market, because the team that made that product actually mirrors the market, right? Because your market is not just men. 50% would be women. I mean, depending on what you're developing, of course. We need to be on the table.
Exposing the data bias in this world designed for men, right? Which is also a great book title. And I love this one so much because it doesn't only focus on the problem side, but it really shows the economic benefit of what actually happens if you take women into sample sizes. What happens if you do research on the needs of females to design specifically fit products for their needs?
Women have their sort of unique abilities that they bring to work, and you mentioned design thinking and that creativity and that empathy part, right? Like design thinking is about being empathetic, about really thinking about the emotions that are driving the customer. And who best to do that than women? Not saying that men cannot do that, they can do that really well too, but empathy is a really strong attribute that we bring to work, not only in developing products, but also managing our teams, right? Equally important. And we've seen during the pandemic, the way that women have involved, taking care of the family, a more collaborative approach. That's what we need to get ahead. Now, the kind of complex challenges that we face, we need more of the collaborative approach and the collaborative traits.
Can you, from your experience, provide us with some insights into diversity inclusion strategies that have worked to tackle some of the problems that are symptomatic for lack of diversity?
Yeah, no, I think you're addressing something that's really key here and important here, is that we think in Scandinavia, like I said, I've been living here for the past 10 years. It's a very egalitarian society. I mean, Norway gives maternity and paternity leaves, so you see a lot more women returning back to work, so you don't have that issue, and you also see men leaving work and picking up their kids from daycares and from school, so that the responsibility is more and more equally shared at home, which definitely helps. But you don't see that egalitarianism reflected at work. So I definitely believe that diversity training helps. So making every employee go through some training so that they understand what are these unconscious bias that they exist, what can they say, what cannot they say. You need role models. So you need to set up mentorship programs, in particular for women, because when women enter these fields that are predominantly male, and the male colleagues are going out and getting drinks and playing golf, and they are systematically being left out of the conversation, and being told to finish this administrative work that's been given to them. So they sit at home working, whereas the male colleagues are going out and getting a drink together, right? And
this is so true. I hear this story all the time.
And that's where the important decisions are being made. And we're telling ourselves that we need to just keep on working hard, and it will get us there. Think, training, role models, mentorship programs.
There is no workplace anymore left where we do not have a lot of encounterments with other people. And this is so important that we know from an early age how to collaborate.
Yeah, I mean, mentorship is huge. I mean, it really helped me in my career early on. I mean, when you're a different person, there's a lot of challenges that you face, right? When everyone thinks the same, you're sort of, you stand out from the crowd. Who do you go for advice? Because if you go to sort of where the norm is, person who just follows the norm of the company, they will tell you the advice that they will give you is like, be like me. But that's not the right advice, right? But that's not actually taking advantage of your diversity. So that's why you need to go for advice. And this is, something that one of my mentors told me, is that you don't need feedback from people who are not where you want to be, right? If you want to lead in a different way, go find someone who's actually leading in that way and ask them for advice, right?
I do have the impression that particularly women are very good at mentoring. They often have the capability to take themselves out of the picture. I can only ask you the right questions. I can help you to challenge you to maybe try something a little bit different along the way.
We listen to advice that says, well, this is how you need to be. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, to conform. Like, we don't need you don't need to ask so many questions. You just need to execute on the task that we're telling you to do. And, we don't need your creativity at work, right? And then we're like, okay, then maybe I don't belong here. If that's what it takes for me to succeed in this
Yeah.
company.
That's such a great advice. Also to be able to say, hey, I'm stopping. It might, look like a great career from the outside, but if it doesn't fit your inner North Star, your passion, leave it. Go somewhere else. You will find it.
I mean, you of course, it starts from the top. You need to make sure that your leadership represents your values, that you're not just only talking about diversity, but actually not promoting diverse candidates and not promoting people who actually stand up, voice their opinions. So you can sort of watch those promotion patterns and see, okay, is this a company that's really values diversity? Is it a core value of them? I think for too long, we have sort of drawn this line, this is work. We don't talk about other topics here. But, it's just life in general. Like, work is a big part of your life. So why not bring in your experiences and tell your stories? And, that's where sort of the human side, the female side can really shine, is that when you can be vulnerable, you can share and inspire people with your stories. And often where we suffer is the middle management, right? So what we can do to make sure that they're also held accountable, that you have KPIs that are not just, being measured on the same way that you've delivered, but you actually are a little bit more creative on how you measure performance.
Yeah.
Because when you're allowing for diversity, when you're allowing for diversity, that means you have to measure performance in a different way, because people will be performing in a different way. Some people will perform on a project management level, right? Like, how can you execute and manage a project? Other people will perform on creativity, on innovation, and actually creating new products and developing new ways of working. So you cannot have like a homogenous way of measuring people. So I think being very aware of that definitely will make an impact.
Now we still look at key performance indicators for individuals. It's time to look for key team behavior indicators. What is different when the incentive system says, hey, we really want to measure the team performance. We want to measure how this team is behaving with other units. We want to see that. Getting a bit more personal, what are some of the challenges that you encountered now working as a woman in such a digital ecosystem?
A good question. And I mean, I think when I was, early on in my career journey, and I would hear some of the women leaders sometimes talk about their journey, and I felt like they would maybe brush the issues under the carpet and say like, oh, I haven't had any problems. You just have to, go out there, be yourself, and, do hard work, and you'll be fine. I think it's important for us to actually talk about the issues that we're having, that yes, it can be difficult, and yes, there will be pushback, and that it is not easy being a woman in a male-dominated field, being a minority in any kind of workplace, right? There will be challenges, there will be unconscious bias. I've myself been in a workplace where I felt like, I was just really struggling to figure out how I can contribute in the best possible way. And then there was no space for me. And I thought maybe there was a problem with me. But then when I started, at lunch in the cafeteria, so talking to some of the other women, I felt like they were all feeling a little bit like that, a little bit out of place. And that's where one of women said to me, I'm leaving. And I said, why? And she said, because I don't get to use my creativity at work. And that just made me so sad. And I said, what are you going to do? And she's like, oh, I'm thinking maybe to go back to school, go to architecture school, And I just felt like, if you're in a big engineering company, we design solutions, like big creative solutions. And if you can't use your creativity here, like, there's something that's really fundamentally wrong. And then I started talking to another girl at another time at lunch, and then she was also saying I'm leaving. And I said, why? Like, and all these people have technical degrees from like the best universities, and you bring them into the workforce and then they're falling out. If you are not able to create that community, that mentorship, where you can create some female mentors or even male mentors that help women, and recognize that, you know, they do need that extra support, that allyship. I mean, I felt like I could have really used some allyship from other women. You know, all you need is your boss or your colleague to say, well, actually, I think Nada had a point here, you know, because if every time your idea is being dismissed, if no one is listening to you, there's no space created for you to speak up, because still staying true to who we are, bringing in our strengths, bringing in our creativity, our curiosity, our sort of feminine spirit, and saying that we belong here and actually we're better because of it.
Wow, that is so powerful. I cannot even respond right now.
And that's what gives me energy, because there's a lot of impact that we still need to make, so that the next generation, you know, my daughter, has an equal playing field.
We need to be open for uncertainty, for new ideas, for, as you say, being vulnerable, being able to express ourselves. And there is a certain point where we will say, it's enough. Sorry, but I don't feel, this is the feeling part, the emotional part, that I belong here. So these two things always have to go together, the cognitive part and the emotional part. And this is something that is now slowly, I think, being more and more realized by companies. We have now heard about your career path, your problem-solving toolkit, so to say, and your success story. What would be your recommendation, the brain fruits that you would like to pass on to our community of listeners as a takeaway to maybe drive more information and more transformation and building a really, truly diverse workforce?
You know, I call this, I think it's time for a new women movement, which is about that, yes, we belong here, but we belong here as who we are. So not asking us to change and conform. So just kind of sticking to that, to yourself, and, you know, coming out with your full confidence if you believe in yourself, because if you let that self-doubt creep in from the outside, then you're not going to be able to perform at your highest level, right? So really taking the time to work on getting to know yourself, getting to know your self-worth, building that over time. And as we mentioned, you know, trust your intuition. Yes, logic is important, right? Yes, reasoning is important. But like you said, it needs to go hand in hand. There's a lot of conditioning that we go through. And one of them is, you know, being a people pleaser, being perfect all the time. And that often gets in our way. It gets in our way because then we don't want to try. We are really afraid of failure. We're afraid of letting people down and disappointing them. So let's shine through our imperfections and just show up as who we are.
I absolutely love that. That's the best advice. I do have the impression for our community, and also for me. That's something that I can definitely relate to. Still happens to me a lot of times. Some little perfectionism going on in the brain, you know, and then you just start overthinking, starting with some self-doubt. And that's something we can train. You know, there's a lot of little tools that we can use to actually teach our brain to foster our self-worth, to not doubt ourselves so much, to not have these thoughts, you know, oh, maybe I cannot. Well, maybe I cannot, but let's try. What's the worst that can happen? I'm just left to say big, great thank you to you, Nada. It was an absolute pleasure to have you.
Same here. I'm just so delighted, and I'm so happy that you're doing this, Hannah. So good luck.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.